May we have a roll call for the agency, please?
Agency members Raymond.
Here.
Najarian.
Here.
Quintero.
Here.
Weaver.
Here.
Chairman Yusefian.
Here. May we have your report, please?
Agenda for the May 29, 2007 regular meeting of the Glendale Redevelopment Agency was posted on Thursday, May 24, 2007 on the bulletin board outside City Hall.
Okay. Do we have minutes?
I'll move approval of the minutes.
Second.
There's a motion, second. The minutes will stand approved as submitted. What's next, please?
Next is oral communication. Discussion is limited to items not a part of this agenda. Each speaker is allowed 5 minutes. Members of the redevelopment agency may question or respond to the speaker, but there will be no debate or decision. The matter may be referred to staff through the executive director for investigation and report.
Well, we have no oral communication cards. I don't see anybody walking forward. Oral communication is closed. What's next, please?
6A is a public hearing. Director of Development Services regarding status report of the February 13, 2007 parking exception granted for a property located at 240 North Grand Boulevard, Glendale Career College. At 6A1 is motion amending conditions to agency parking exception as directed by the agency. 6A2 motion directing staff to continue working with the Glendale Career College and the property owner Dorn Platts as appropriate to fulfill the conditions of the approved parking exception. At 6A3 motion revoking parking exception and directing staff to prepare findings consistent with the evidence and testimony.
Okay, and with that, I'll go to Mr. Starbird.
Yes, Chair Yusefian, I'll go to Phil Lanzafame for the staff report. Phil?
Mr. Chairman, members of the Redevelopment Agency, in February of this year, you had granted a 119-space parking exception to Glendale Career College to move into the property at 240 North Brand. As part of that exception, you had adopted a number of conditions. The parking exception was granted for a maximum of 3 years. There was to be a $1 million cash bond, a covenant to guarantee that Dorn Platts would terminate the college's lease. There was a non-binding letter of intent for the college to lease space out at a project that was being developed at Duran and San Fernando Road, and then that the college would fund 2 scholarships for the 3 years that they were there. The conditions were to be satisfied prior to the issuance of a certificate of occupancy for the college. There was at the time expressed a desire to move very quickly on the project, and so there was every expectation that work would begin immediately and that it would just be a couple of months until it was completed and the college could move in. In March, the redevelopment agency had asked us to come back with a status report. At that time, we had reported to you that the 2 parties were still working to finish their business terms and that a permit was ready to be issued, yet had not been. You, at that time, asked the staff to come back in 60 days, which was actually last week, but we held over to this week because of lack of quorum. Today, to this point, we have received a representation from the college that the business deal is complete and has been signed. There are some proprietary business terms that are included in that, so we did get a representation. We've not seen the lease or the letter of intent. With respect to a building permit, it is my understanding that Dorn Platts, the property owner representative, was in the building department today to pull a permit. However, staff that needed to sign off on it was not there. He could not wait and did not return. So at this point, a building permit has not yet been pulled. However, again, we understand that it is in a position to be pulled. That completes staff's report in terms of status. Mr. Baker is here representing the Glendale Career College, and don't know if he has anything to add or answer questions. I certainly can speak for himself. But from staff's perspective, it has been 60 days, but we do see that a permit is ready to be issued, and we're back here for your direction as to what you would like to do with this item.
Any questions for staff? Mr.
I have some questions. Phil, run that by us one more time. That in terms of the critical points that we had requested, there was the bond issue, there was the agreement between the parties, there was a covenant, and you said because of some proprietary issues that we couldn't see the document?
There's some proprietary business terms and just use that as kind of a catch-all. There's some things that are between the two parties that are included in the lease that they would rather they stay between those two parties. And so what we got was a representation that they were.
But we were all in this together.
Right.
We give them parking, and they get their occupancy, and
I'd leave to Mr.
now we're
Baker.
playing secrets.
I would leave to Mr. Baker those items. We could ask for.
We don't want the recipe to Coca-Cola. This is, I imagine it involves price per square foot, term, and I personally would feel better if those terms were open to the entire council in light of the rather bumpy road that we've had in bringing this deal forward going back 2 years. That's my position on
We
it.
have
I
an
know
attorney in the
maybe you
audience.
can't answer that, but
I
but
can't,
that's where...
but I will pass that back to the parties, that is something that we would like to see,
Ask Mr.
the actual copy of the lease.
Can he answer anything?
Ms. Van Meiden.
Mr. Chair, members of the agency, point of clarification concerning the bond and the covenant and agreement. Those two items are not required to be executed until prior to the issuance of the certificate of occupancy. I will report that I have been working on those documents along with counsel for the Glendale Community College up to and including last week concerning the mechanics of the deposit itself and coming to an agreement on that. So I just wanted to let you know that those were being worked on, and that to the extent that they've been reviewed by Glendale Community College, they have been. We are waiting for some additional input, if there is any, from Dornplatz on the covenant agreement document only.
Thank you. Any other question? Thank you, Mr. Lansfang. I'll open the public hearing portion of this hearing. Sergik Kesachchian.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, member of the council. My name is Sergio Kesochekian. I wanted to introduce myself. I'm the campus director for Glendale Career College. Being very new at this, I have asked Mr. Baker and Mr. Khan to come here and would be happy to answer any questions that you have. So if I may ask Mr. Baker and Mr. Khan. Like the twins coming forward.
Not quite.
Sheldon Baker, 100 West Broadway.
Rodney Kahn, 1111 North Brand Boulevard, Suite 403, here in the city of Glendale.
And we're going to try to answer all your questions to the best of our ability. We represent Glendale Career College. We do not represent the owner of the property, Dornplatz, as I'm sure all of you know. Mr. Yosafian and the rest of you had asked for a non-binding letter of intent, and that was signed after the form had all been approved. It's signed, and copies several months ago were given to the city, and the clerk was handed additional copies for this meeting, and that'll be handed to you. The non-binding letter of intent has really been superseded in a very substantial way in the past period since you approved of this matter, and in the last 60 days there have been significant negotiations, discussions regarding the San Fernando location. Talk of the lease terms for that location, and I am not handling those. Neither one of us are involved in those negotiations, but I'm advised that they have been very fruitful to this point. No lease for San Fernando site is signed, but it's way beyond the letter of intent that you have. Secondly, significant negotiations took place regarding the lease for the Brand Boulevard site. There was a great deal of difficulty between the parties in reaching an agreement on that lease. That lease, again, We did not work on that lease. I'm advised it's been signed, and again, the clerk has given you a letter signed by Dornplatz and the college that lease is signed and in place. I would tell you that both the negotiations for San Fernando Road and the execution of that lease are indeed significant steps. You've asked for, Mr. Nigerian, you asked for a copy of that lease, and I am not at liberty to hand over a copy of the lease and make it a public document. I would suggest that consideration be given to the fact that the relationship between the landlord and the tenant, the pricing, the concessions, the agreements back and forth is a private matter between two private entities. Yes, we're in with the city as far as a parking exception, but the city, to my knowledge, is not contributing to the any of the tenant improvements, is not financially, other than the parking exception, participating financially in this transaction. My client, the college, is paying for the spaces during the 3-year period of time, and we're happy to tell you that the lease is for a 3-year term. They have to get out, and that is backed up by will be backed up by a $1 million cash bond and by a covenant that runs with the land. We believe that the terms of the agreement between the parties is a private matter and not for the city to participate in those terms.
Well, Mr. Chair, my concern is not so much the price. I think the term is critical on this. Any options which may exist are critical.
There's no options.
Well,
I have not seen the lease because I was not involved in it. And let me see if we can excerpt several clauses from the lease. If we're not trying to stonewall anything, want to cooperate. If it's a lease term and a provision about options or lack thereof, let me see if we can excerpt those out of the lease term.
Right. I do not care about the price.
Right.
The critical thing that we've expressed is that at the end of that 3-year period, that accommodations are made for a relocation.
Right. And let me see what I can do on that. And again, there's also council talked to you about the bond, the cash bond. The terms of that are virtually worked out. We've been waiting for some of the details about where the money is going to be held and the interest rate, things of that nature. But there is no dispute whatsoever between the college and the city in that regard. The covenant, the college has signed off on the covenant, but we're only one party to it. The city has also. We're waiting for Dornplatz. Right. The scholarships are ready to go. There was an MOU drafted. That's been approved of by at least by our clients, and I cannot speak for the city, obviously. But that, it's pretty routine, and everybody's satisfied there. The other thing I know that you want to know about is the building permit and the status of that, and Mr. Khan is prepared to address that.
Mr. Bicker, before you get down, as well as a start date on that lease, if you have that. I know that you're waiting for this preliminary stuff to come in, but I'd like to see that as well, to at least have that within the frame of reasonable
The start date is tied to the certificate of occupancy. That's what triggers all the time span as we go along. The 3 years starts then. The rent, everything is tagged to that date. and obviously the termination point. But let me get that clause.
And Mr. Baker, before you sit down, I have one other comment. I appreciate the fact that you have provided us documents basically saying that the lease has been agreed upon between two of them. One is signed by Dornplatz, the other one is signed by the Glendale Career College.
Right.
But this basically deals on that the site on Brand.
That's correct.
Okay, I would appreciate if when you guys come back next time to provide something of a similar document for the San Fernando one.
I don't think that that will be ready, and that was not a condition of anything. The condition was that they sign a non-binding letter of intent and that they negotiate, and they are doing that.
But you said that they have already done that, and there's...
No, they are working on specific terms of that lease, the length of that lease. But you have to understand, I doubt if any plans have been drawn. That's a vacant hunk of property as we stand here, and it's a complicated build and lease situation. And I'm being very straight with you. I'd be very surprised if that lease would be ready in 60 days or whatever period of time. I think I don't know how long it's going to take to do that. But the point is the parties have gone beyond saying we're going to talk about it. They are really talking about it and negotiating.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Khan.
As it relates specifically to the tenant improvement and the building permit, we had our contractor, and it's not our contractor, it's actually Dornplatz's contractor, Evil Sizer Construction Company, who was here, actually had to leave to go to another meeting. As Mr. Lanzafame pointed out...
So Mr. Bill Evil Sizer is not here?
He's not going to be speaking. As Mr. Lanzafame pointed out, he went in to the City Permit Services Department this morning to obtain the permit. Unfortunately, Jan Edwards, who is his building plan checker, was not available. He'll be going back again tomorrow in the afternoon, and in fact, he's going to grab one of the redevelopment agency staff case managers, who's Bob Cadlick, who's inherited this project. They will go down and he'll obtain the building permit. I specifically asked him how long would the construction take place in terms of when the construction activity started, the length of time, because I knew that was an issue in the past. He informed me that it would take approximately 10 weeks for the construction from the time they start the work until the time they complete it. So that's about 2.5 months. There is one caveat that he did throw in. There is some discussions or further discussions that need to take place between himself and the current property owner, which is Dornplatz, as it relates to the construction work and his contract, and once they start working. So that's one kind of piece of the puzzle that's still a little bit outstanding. But the building permit should be obtained by tomorrow in the afternoon, and then the construction time period would take 10 weeks. I think Mr. Baker addressed all the other issues, so I won't repeat or go over what was already discussed. One of the things that we would ask of you, if it is possible, is in the last few weeks, negotiations have kind of come to a head where things are now moving forward, where in the past they were not. So I think in the next 60 days, I think a lot of work will take place, a lot of activity will take place, and we'll know very clearly in terms of the exact times and dates for the council to consider. Anyways, I'll conclude my remarks. If you have any questions of any of us, we'd be happy to answer them.
Questions?
So it was a good thing the council put the fire to the collective feet of the parties.
I think it was a very good thing.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Barry Allen.
Mr. Chair, Council, staff, agency. I'm Barry Allen with Vanguard. It's good that Council did do that, did put the feet to the fire, or the flame to the feet. I think that maybe it's time that that Council start suggesting to staff that they when they do deals like this and you approve them, to have some drop-dead dates and have some timelines and benchmarks and milestones affected and put in place, because remember, staff's the ones, they get the big bucks, you guys don't. You have to rely on the work that they do so that the things that you do are accurate and appropriate. The questions that I get from my constituents, which is the public, and I try to represent them fairly and accurately, is what's going on Brand, on Central, on Broadway. We've heard about all of these things that are supposed to be happening, but we don't see them. We don't see anybody shepherding the Meadows, the 610, the projects all over time, including the Glendale Career College. It just goes on and on and on. And we need to get this agency and the council to stand up to the plate and say, we've got to get some deadlines and some timelines. We're trying to build a new city. We're trying to rebuild downtown, and nothing's happening. People are looking forward to these changes. You've sold them on it, and now you're not delivering. Somehow or other, there's got to be something that is causing this body to lose its momentum when these decisions have been made. You agreed to the Career College. You agreed to the Dornplatz proposal. You didn't agree to the Dornplatz, let's tear everything down between the Alex Theater and the corner. But we need to move things along. And it's up to you as representatives of the people to take the leadership position of your management staff and move them along to get the things going that the public has been asking for and that you sold them on. I'm Barry Allen. Thank you.
Mr. Allen, you may want to hang around. There is a joint special meeting of Glendale City Council and Redevelopment Agency later on that talks about that specific thing, how to take steps to kind of shortcut some of these processes.
Thank you.
Thank you. With that, the public... Yes. Mr. Quintero.
I was going to move 6A too.
After the public hearing is closed?
That's what I was trying to do. I was trying to close the public hearing. And I want to go back to Ms. Van Buyden. Staff had recommended 3 different proposals, with the exception of the one that talks about turning it down.
6A2.
What is the difference between the first and the second one?
The first motion, Mr. Chair, members of the agency, is to amend a condition in the parking exception to address the commencement of the parking exception, and that if it fails to commence by a date certain, that it is no longer operative. And so it was to insert a date by amending a condition. So that's the first
If we wish.
motion, if you wish to do so. And the motion has a blank to fill in, so that could be discussed. The second is just for purposes of directing staff to continue to work with the applicant and the property owner for purposes of fulfilling the conditions as set forth and as discussed previously. Although a third option that is possible here, given the effectiveness of setting this hearing for purposes of getting the staff report, is to continue this matter to a date certain without further public notice, and then at such time the agency would be in a position to reconsider these same matters for purposes of moving this process along.
And which option is that? That's
That would be on your motion.
just to continue
Correct.
the matter to a date certain?
It was somewhat of a brief discussion sidebar that we had about when you started to hear about certain things that have not been accomplished yet. They're still looking and working on certain things, that perhaps a thought might be to continue this whole issue of potential revocation of the parking exception, et cetera, for maybe 60 days without further public notice, anticipating that that might keep some players' feet to the fire.
Mr. Quintero and Mr. Najarian.
This is a complex transaction, obviously. It has to do with a downtown, it has to do with moving a college, no easy task in itself since there's medical technologies that have to be moved and so forth. But in addition to that, then you have the downtown parcel that needs to be occupied. And then finally, as the gentleman mentioned, you have a new building that is going to be built on vacant land on San Fernando Road. So this isn't an easy endeavor for any of the parties. So from my perspective, I think we've hammered out the deal at our end, and all we have to do is wait for them to accomplish what they need to accomplish at their end. The moving into the downtown location, that in and of itself, as I've always said, I think is a plus for the downtown area, a plus for the merchants. We're basically selling parking to this career college in an empty parking structure. We've all recognized that. So all in all, I'm fine with 6A2. It just basically will give them more time to hammer out the details on San Fernando Road.
Mr. Najarian? Mr. Weaver?
I'm not sure if that was a motion for A2.
6A2, yeah.
I would like to offer a substitute motion, and that is that we do continue this for a date certain.
There's a second first.
Well,
Motion.
is there a second?
Yes, mine.
There's a
But I want to
second.
make a comment.
Okay.
So sometime.
Okay. I'll come back after there's a substitute.
Right, I would like to make a substitute motion that we continue this matter for a period of 60 days. I think it's clear that what truly got the parties moving towards an agreement on this was the prospect of coming before council, and with no offense and no comment on whether we want the project or not. I think it's clear that we've already gone down that road, but what we do want is all the details to be ironed out and to keep some sort of rein on this project so we don't continue down the path of one issue cropping up and stalling it, whether it's in our building department or in the plan check or any other area. And if there is a problem, then they're certainly able to come before us and say, look, I had a problem with building or with fire or whatever issue there was, and we're certainly then going to be able to address the issue at that point. But I'd really like to keep a leash on this project and keep it on our agenda to encourage the parties to consummate the deal and get the college moved in and get their operations up and going. So that would be my motion for a 60-day continuance.
Is there a second to the substitute motion?
I have a question. Procedurally.
Yes, Mr. Draymond.
We have a motion, we have a second, we have a request for an alternative motion. Where are we with this?
When there is a substitute motion, if the substitute motion gets a second, you vote on the substitute motion first. If it passes, the prior motion dies. If it does not pass, then we go back to the prior motion. That's how it is.
I'll second the substitute motion. Request for a substitute motion.
Okay, so the substitute motion has been seconded. Let's have a roll call for the substitute motion to continue this matter for 60 days. So
When may I get my comments?
and Mr. Weaver has his comments.
One, the college is paying a significant lease amount currently, and the school year, I presume, will start in late August, September, the new school year. A year round. So they have every intent to get in as soon as possible, not delay. And just a general comment, when the public thinks it takes so long to get an agreement or get anything done around here, it's as frustrating to me as I think every council member I've ever served with. The wheels turn slowly, not near as fast as the public would like it to move or think it can move. That's the nature of the beast we deal with the public-private sector relationships. So I think it's moving at the right pace. Well, no, not the right pace. I'd like it to move faster, but I can understand the reason for delays in getting to that point. So I will be opposing a date certain because I don't think there's any
thing will cause it to move faster or keep it on schedule.
Okay. There a motion and a second. I will be supporting the substitute motion. I know sometimes the city gets a bad rap for not getting things delivered on time and so on and so forth. I will tell you in this case, after we approved what we wanted to do, they were ready. The city was ready for Dornplatz to pull the permit. They just sat on their hands. And so in this case, I don't think the problem is the college or the city. I think they waited until the last possible moment, and when they saw there's a possibility of revocation, all of a sudden the flurry of activities took place about 2 weeks before this deadline came. I'm sorry to have done this. I wish I would have just gone out there and supported just the first motion, but I think what Mr. Allen said is absolutely true. A lot of people are expecting things to get done, and the way, maybe the crude way of doing this is possibly to do with the substitute motion, to get some of these things moving. So with that, roll call for the substitute motion.
On that substitute motion, Mr. Chair, members of the agency, I would recommend that we insert a date of July 31st without further public notice. That's essentially 61 or 62 days from now.
I'll accept that as the maker.
Okay.
That way you have the date certain.
Seconder accept?
Yes.
Okay. The motion has been made and seconded. Roll call.
Agency members Draymond,
Yes.
Najarian,
Yes.
Quintero,
No.
Weaver,
No.
Chairman Yusefian.
Aye. Motion carries. What's next, please?
Any agency member or staff comments?
My colleagues want to make any, this is the opportunity for
Sure.
us under the state law to let people know what we did at the ICSC meeting, since we went there on taxpayer dough.
That means you can't do it at city council, too.
Right. You just do in one place. This is an agency or issue. Mr. Draymond.
Yes, but my comments aren't about the ICSC.
Oh, you can have other ones, then
Yeah.
I'll talk about that.
Yeah. I figured my colleagues will talk about that. I want to talk about what Mr. Allen was talking about in a broader sense. The pace at which projects, especially related to this agency, move. And it's one of the frustrations that I heard intensively from every possible avenue in this city prior to my coming here. And of course, now that I'm here, I hear it all the more. From small business wants to do a modification to their storefront or an addition, to developers with a small d and developers with a capital D who want to move their projects forward, to the public who's been told about the wonderful things that are coming to this city, the wonderful developments in the downtown area, in the redevelopment projects, the retail projects that are coming, the mixed-use projects that are coming. But they don't see behind the pace here, behind this chamber, behind the dais, they don't see the delay, they don't see the lack of what appears to be the lack of emphasis, the lack of drive. What they see is very little change. From the business community, who has been promised the influx of new homeowners in the downtown core, who are going to buy the goods and services that are going to drive all of this retail. And then, of course, just the folks themselves who are, as I say, waiting to see this brand new Glendale that's going to arise in our downtown area. And I've become frustrated because I don't see everybody keeps using the metaphor, the feet to the fire. I would like to see a flamethrower put under those feet. This is not an indictment of staff, by the way, in case somebody wants to try to interpret it that way. I think it's the process. There's a culture within government. And sometimes I've noticed, since I've been here, that things are judged as being successful or unsuccessful or moving quickly or not so based on what's going on in this building or these complex of buildings, but not necessarily from the standpoint of what's going on outside and how the people that foot the bill are looking at all of this. And I'm getting a little annoyed, and perhaps I'm just in a cantankerous mood today, but I am unhappy with it. And I would certainly like to hear my colleagues address an attempt to crank up the pace. I think it's frustrating. Thank you.
Mr. Quintero.
Well, I'll be much more succinct. My comments are, I agree 100% with that, with those series of observations and perception. I agree 100%. We have to start putting some energy behind some of the processes that take place here, because I just think they take way too long, and I just think we could do a heck of a lot more. And as we travel, the ICS and all the rest of it, you become much more aware of what's being done in other cities and so forth. So we need to increase our efforts.
Mr. Weaver.
Well, I guess I'm defending staff. Sat here in 11 years, and I've watched various times of my colleagues sitting on this dais requesting things of staff. I think a couple Tuesdays ago, staff recorded 22 requests made by council members for action. Every time you ask staff to do something else, the assumption is that all they have to do is snap their fingers and it's done. It takes time to do the research. It takes resources. We've already tasked divisions like the planning division on things we want to have back here soon: view ordinance, hillside, mobility plan, any number of things. We continue to expect staff to respond to quickly, and every time we add to it with additional requests, the manpower isn't there to do that. That's the reality of having a limited staff, because we don't have the money in the general fund to hire additional personnel. The general fund already, 86% of it is staffing. And to add to it, where's the money going to come from? So every time we give more tasks, then the city manager really has to look at the priorities within the city and see what goes first, what we just asked for last, or the priorities we put on during budget time. So I don't think it's an easy task. Unfortunately, there are delays. I served 37 years in civil service, and I saw the same exact things. The demand put on staff, and I would sit there and say, well, what does the colonel want next? We can't do it all. When I'm working on, am I supposed to set it aside and do this because the colonel wants it now? Most of the time, the answer was yes. So it looks simple, but it's not near as simple as it's made out to be.
Well, let me add my 2 cents to it. I think the idea in here is maybe we should become colonels.
That's what I was
So we
about
could
to
say,
say.
maybe we should become generals. How's that?
Generals even better.
I think what my issue is, I'd like to give a little report about what happened to the ICSC. That's International Shopping Centers Association. And 4 of us were there, and I would tell you that for the 2 days that I was there, and I saw some of my colleagues there, we did an awful lot of walking to a point that my back was killing me. I couldn't walk anymore. We had about 56 to 58,000 people who showed up to that seminar. To that ICSC conference. About 2,000 of them were public participants. These were from other cities, other agencies that were public sector. There were several cities, large cities that you would not have think that they even need to be there. Places like Boston, places like Washington, D.C., huge cities that were there, and they had huge booths, and they were sitting there and dealing with economics. And in one case, I saw a state of Michigan, if I'm not mistaken, had a big booth there on their economic development, dealing with that. We also had small cities like Hesperia, who was out there, little booth, $7,000 their cost was, as we kind of asked what it cost to be here, and most of it had to do with them paying the union, setting up their display. But they were out there, and there were people who would go to them and talk about what they would like to do there, how they would like to open up a business there, what are some of the areas for their business, what are the areas for the housing. I attended, among some of my colleagues, several meetings, seminars. I will tell you that all of a sudden, mixed use is on fire. Everybody has accepted it. It is the future. This is what's happening all over the United States. As a matter of fact, the rest of the world is continuing the same way. And while there were some challenges in the past as far as how you financed it and so on and so forth, all of that has been taken care of. And so everybody is hot on mixed use. We saw huge, elaborate models. I would say some of them were as big as where this whole dais is. And of all the mixed-use projects that is being made, and it wasn't just one or two or three, I mean, there were a lot of them, and they're doing. There were a couple of other countries that were there, believe it or not. Russia had a booth there. So did the Emirates, who had come in from Abu Dhabi. And if you thought you have seen huge buildings in Las Vegas. The projects in Abu Dhabi is like Las Vegas on steroid. It was just incredible, some of the buildings that were designed, and the beauty of the structure was just mind-boggling to me. We did have an opportunity to talk to General Groth. All four of us, we went there and met 2-on-2. We also went and had a little talk to Mr. Caruso on some of the leasing. I think by the 10th we will get a list from him of all the places that are leased out. The list of the tenants that he has there is incredible. From what I'm told, the women would love it. I have no clue, but he tells me that some of these stores are not even in Rodeo Drive. So I'm pretty sure that a lot of shoppers are looking forward to some of those stores coming up in here. We did get a chance to also talk to several hospitality companies. As you know, there's been several projects that have been coming to Glendale as far as hotels are concerned. We wanted to know whether or not there is some truth about the hotel market being so good in Glendale or not being so good in Glendale. Are we reaching a saturation point or not? Based on the conversation I have had, and I think some of my colleagues have had with some of the different vendors, apparently we happen to be the bullseye, center of the bullseye when it comes to hotel market. There was a discussion that we had several large developer shopping owners and also the mayors of several cities like Charlotte, North Carolina, and so on and so forth. And the question was asked from the mayors, what do you think is the biggest challenge of the cities when they deal with a developer? What is it one thing that you would want them to do for you? And the two things that was mentioned. One, we want them to be honest. And the second challenge is that we hope that our staff implements what we tell them, not what they want to. The second question that was asked from the developers, what is it that you would like to see from the cities, was entitlement process, an opportunity to contact the public and actually bring the public on board. So those were the two big challenges of this seminar that I took away with me. But I would say that it is one of those things that I've been there for 4 years now. I missed last year, but I've been there for 4 years. And I will tell you, this is a place, after seeing what happened this year, this is something that this agency needs, not only needs, must have a presence. We need to have a booth. We need to have a place that we could hang our plans and show them. I did go around, and I think Mr. Lanzafame went around and handed out several of those Invest in Glendale DVDs with cards and so on and so forth. But I think if you don't have a presence in a place like that, you're not going to get the very highly qualified and beautiful projects that developers want to do, because they're not going to come and look for you. So you basically have to make it easy for them, because there are big fish in the sea out there trying to get the best minnows. So, hey, we got to get out there. So that was my report. I thought I'd throw something in there. Mr.
Thank you.
Najarian.
Everything you said is true. And the one thing I took away was during a seminar, luncheon seminar, in which the head of General Growth and the mayors of St. Louis and Denver, it was a simple remark, and it stuck with me, and I'm sure it stuck with Bob, and that is that time kills a good deal.
Mm-hmm.
And they said you could have the best deal, but if for whatever reason it can't get through the entitlement, it can't get through the permit phase, it's going to be dead. That there's a window of opportunity for every deal that is labeled a good deal, and I think
miss it, it's gone.
You miss it, it's gone. Lost opportunity. So I can't add much more than what you said, Mr. Yusefian.
Okay. And Mr. Starbird.
Mr. Chairman, if I can, because I'm taken a little bit aback by the comments about making things happen and apparently things not happening. So just some observations. At a time before at ICSC, they were talking about mixed use. Your planning staff and you were planning for mixed use on San Fernando Road. Relative to the housing projects, which I assume is referenced in the downtown area, you couldn't have begun an entitlement process unless you had effective zoning in the downtown, and you probably couldn't do effective zoning unless you had a way to mitigate what was likely to be impacts from traffic, which we've all known is one of the biggest constraints we have in developing the downtown. And frankly, you would have had a difficult time 7 years ago convincing this community that housing was something that was good. Now, it's in vogue now, but there was a lot of question in this community 7 years ago whether that was something we wanted or needed in the downtown area. You and your predecessors have put a lot of effort into building the foundation in this community of what I suspect in the next several years will reap tremendous benefits and will take this community to another level. It's already being recognized among your peers. Hassan mentioned to me this morning that SCAG, the Southern California Association of Governments, is giving Glendale an award, the highest that it can give, in recognition of the downtown specific plan and the mobility plan along with it. And we were up against the big ones. We were up against the City of Los Angeles and their Grand Avenue development. We were up against Pasadena and Long Beach. That kind of effort takes time, and many times it takes moving a community in a direction so that there can be broad support for it. Recall when you adopted your DSP, Downtown Specific Plan. You didn't have a council chambers full of people, frankly, beating you up over that move. And that's because there was 7 years invested in getting there. The Americana, which as many of you will recall, was not an easy process. There were many people who frankly didn't think that was the right direction to go in, and yet we are seeing the result of the Americana almost every day, and you saw it at ICSC in what that's doing for the downtown. The Embassy Suites Hotel, when some people were saying, oh, we're not sure there's additional capacity for hotels in Glendale, you and your predecessors worked for 10 years to bring the Embassy Suites to fruition when other communities couldn't land a hotel. So just an observation, people may think things move slowly. It isn't necessarily the organization or the bureaucracy or government. Many things have to have a foundation laid that takes time to lay them for good things to happen. Communities that have had successes in their downtown, and I've experienced some, can take 20, 25 years before they reap the benefits of tough decisions that are made in the early days of those communities. And you can point to them like Old Town Pasadena. Old Town Pasadena didn't happen overnight. There were some very difficult decisions made by the City Council to begin to lay the foundation for what today seems to be a tremendous success by everybody's gauge. And yet that didn't come easy. And the same thing is true here in Glendale and is true in communities across California. What I heard in feedback at ICSC from many of you was that, frankly, there are great things happening in Glendale, like at the moment seeming to be at the corner of Main and First Street in the hotel industry. I hope that's true, in which case we have a great opportunity in front of us. So I guess I have a little bit of a different view, and that is that I think many things take a lot of work on the foundation, especially in a community where there's a lot of question about whether or not a direction, especially involving development, is the right one to take. And I think it points out that it takes a lot of investment and energy and arduous work by people in a leadership position like yours and by staff to lay a foundation so good things can happen. And of course, there are dynamics such as the market that one can't drive, such as what we're experiencing now with market rate housing. And all you can do is lay the foundation and hope that the timing will be right so you can take advantage of it when it comes. But frankly, in many of those areas, whether it is what is now, once was termed a fad, is now called the emerging industry for lifestyle centers. Recall when you selected Caruso, the biggest developers in the world said that's a passing fad. Those big developers now are investing billions of dollars in lifestyle centers. You chose Caruso before the Grove was a success. From that to things like your mixed use that you were implementing, even before in the industry they saw that as the new wave to ride. You were doing it here in Glendale, and it's going to bring you results.
Mr. Draymond and then Mr. Weaver.
Yes. Well, I'm sorry you're taken aback, Mr. City Manager. My intention was not to cause you to be taken aback. However, we do see it differently because beginning with Mr. Weaver and now, this is a redefinition of what I'm talking about. You're talking about bringing the public to a project, getting them to support a project. That's not what I'm discussing, and that wasn't the issue I raised. The issue is not bringing the public along. And I'm not talking about mammoth projects like Americana. I'm talking about even small projects. And that is part of the issue. Mr. Weaver, with all due respect, what you're talking about, a city must continue to develop. You know that, I know that, we all do. It must continue to develop or it dies. So no one is suggesting that there will not continue to be projects. What is the alternative then? To stop? We call a cease to it? And then we catch up and then move forward? Of course not. There will always be new projects. So we don't have the luxury of saying we don't have the money to add staff. These are challenges that cities always face. We will continue to face them. And I believe we can move the process along. When a small business faces an 8.5-month delay over what kind of an awning they will have, that's not necessarily an issue that equates to bringing Americana. But if you own a small business and you can't get your front door open for 8.5 months because we're in deliberations over an awning, that's the world. That's the world to that person. This local government has made promises across the board to the residents of this city, to the developers in this city with a capital D and a small d, to retailers, and everyone else. And what we're seeing, what I'm seeing, and the feedback I'm getting has to do with wanting us to move forward, not telling us, wait. So that's a redefinition of what I had raised.
I'm getting Mr. City Attorney getting very nervous.
Not a time for debate. This is an item that's not on the agenda.
Okay, well, I don't know what I can say, Mr. Howard, without tripping over the line.
Well, I think the line has been crossed, in my view.
Agendized so we can talk about the whole concept of development in the city and so on and so forth.
But I have my say, and then you can slap my hands later.
I don't slap anybody's hand. I can just indicate where I think the line is on.
Point well taken, Mr. Draymond. There are things that are simple and take too long. Have been for the 10 years I've been here. I've had my discussions with Mr. Starbird. I know we're looking at remedies in some areas to streamline operations. Hopefully that'll happen in my lifetime. But no, it's very frustrating to the homeowner because I've got them just like you have. And as far as on the other item, talking about the downtown, when I sat here 10 years ago with Mr. Baker, we were talking about the same exact thing, downtown, putting in downtown zoning standards. It took 10 years to get it here. Sheldon shaking his hand down, yes. It took that long. Very frustrating. It would take that long to get the zoning settled so we could move ahead. And Starbird, when you talked about the embassy suites, I think that was just easy to do. Well, a problem the developer had was they had to come to the Army Corps of Engineers because they needed to cover the flood control channel to get the front entrance to the hotel in, and we had to develop air rights policy within the Corps and the County of Los Angeles in order to just cover the channel, and then
In the Hilton.
the Hilton.
You said Embassy Suite.
Excuse me. Was the DoubleTree or the Red Lion then?
Red line.
Red Line.
And then they had to go out and get structural engineers down in the state of Texas to structurally design that structure. I know, Mr. Draymond, this is off the cover, but I'm just illustrating something takes a lot of time. In that case, I'm not trying to prolong this, but the channel wall and the garage were less than 1 foot apart. And they had to have a structural engineer look at the flood control channel, totally filled with water, and a major earthquake hits. The whole hotel had to stand up. So there was delay after delay just with the Corps of Engineers to give permission to the Red Line to move ahead. The public doesn't see a lot of this. So on big ones, yes, it's much more complicated. I understand thoroughly what you're saying about the awnings. Like I said, in my lifetime, I hope we correct all that.
Mr. Starbird, when is the matrix report coming to us?
I don't know at the moment. I'll get you a date.
Okay. I think we should schedule that at a time that we have ample opportunities to discuss it, because I have a feeling that is the appropriate venue for all of this discussion, because that is what the matrix report is all about, to deal with this issue.
The other thing that's helpful is on these specific anecdotal examples. It's nice to get the specifics, because there's always another side to that story as we learn when we look into the specifics. So to the extent we can get those, we can help illuminate what actually went on in these anecdotal situations where the city usually ends up being the brunt of the complaints. Sometimes we're at fault, many times we're not.
Agreed.
Okay. All right. And finally, I would like to say we should be able to have discussions and not blame everybody, okay? It's just we need to get it done, that's all. With that, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
We're adjourned for Redevelopment Agency.
Okay.
Wow.
We go to
We have
the,
a series of joint meetings next,
The housing, so
and they're all
Laura can go home.
they're all involving housing
all
and the
involved.
city council, and one of them includes redevelopment. Correct?
no, there's one with
One or two with housing.
City Council and Glendale Redevelopment, and Mr. Mayor, I would say, since we discussed about development standards and so on and so forth for so much, this would be natural to go to, because
mean
this
it could be a
mainstreams
quickie?
a lot of stuff. This is a quickie, as far as I'm concerned.
As long as you're comfortable with it.
I'm comfortable
Okay.
with it.
Mr. Draymond, you shouldn't be laughing.
Do
Mr.
we,
Draymond.
okay, let's call that meeting to order. This is going to be, in case GTV wants to know, this is going to be the joint meeting with
Right.
council and redevelopment.
Call the joint special meeting of the City Council and the Glendale City Redevelopment Agency is hereby called to order by...
Yes, call to order the joint meeting as the clerk read into the record. Let's have roll call for the city council.
Council members Draymond.
Here.
Montero.
Here.
Weaver.
Here.
Yusefian.
Here,
Mayor Najarian.
Here.
maybe a roll call for Redevelopment Agency, please.
Agency members Draymond.
Here, sorry.
Here.
Yes, yeah, I'm still here, yes.
Agency members
I'll check, yes.
Najarian.
Here.
No,
Montero.
Here.
Weaver.
Here.
Chairman Yusefian.
Here. Maybe have
Okay.
your, that's right, you're right.
Would you please read the first item?
Well, this is just options to consolidate review authority over discretionary permits, example CUP variance, et cetera, with downtown specific plan area, DSP, and redevelopment area and direction to staff.
Thank you. Mr. Starbird?
Yes, I go to Hassan Haghani, Director of Planning for the staff report. Hassan?
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, Mr. Chair, and members of the Redevelopment Agency. I'm going to, you received packets of the slide presentation for this afternoon. I think in light of what we just heard, I can probably summarize the entire presentation in the first 8 slides. I'll stop at slide number 8, and if you had further interest in the slides that follow, in other words, more detail about those, we can then continue. But let me just explain what this is. In March, we had a study session with you, at which time we discussed potentially combining some of the review authority that right now the zoning administrator has and with the redevelopment agency in the redevelopment area of the downtown specific plan. One of the 3 points came up. One is that if we do not watch our steps, we could have 2 different processes for the downtown specific plan area, which would be then different than the redevelopment agency processes in the San Fernando Road redevelopment area. In other words, if we don't watch ourselves, we might create 3 processes in addition to city processes. And you gave us some directions and some parameters based on which we think we can propose one way to consolidate the review authority and actually cut down review process considerably as well. What we're doing is we're recommending that conditional use permits and variance reviews that currently are being done by the zoning administrator be transferred to the agency and or council for projects that are greater than 10,000 square feet of new construction or projects that require a development agreement. The 10,000 square foot threshold is not something that we just made up. The 10,000 square foot threshold is a threshold in the mixed-use zoning of the San Fernando Road. Under 10,000 square feet, several uses do not require a CUP, and they're permitted by right. And then over 10,000 square feet, they usually require a conditional use permit that kicks in the discretionary review. We think that's a significant threshold, and it's been discussed, and that makes sense. So at that point,